Why did the Admiral stop in front of her longer than anyone else? The formation of elite SEAL operators stood in rigid silence, the morning sun slicing across the Naval Special Warfare Center in. 20 of the Navy's best men, hardened warriors who had clawed their way through hell to earn this uniform, stood shoulder to shoulder. And at the very end of the line, barely visible against their bulk and their arrogance, stood a woman. Lieutenant Commander Blackwood. She was the only one in the entire formation who didn't belong, at least. That was the unspoken belief. To them, she was an intruder in their brotherhood, a crack in the wall of tradition, a policy experiment forced upon them by Washington politics. To the Admiral, she was something worse, proof that his world was changing and he wasn't ready to let it. Admiral Victor walked the line with deliberate steps, his chest heavy with ribbons, his eyes sharp as razors. 62 years old, yet still carrying the posture of a man who had built his life on discipline and control. He had spent 3 decades teaching others what it meant to be unbreakable. But today, this morning, he came with something else in mind. When his gaze landed on, the air shifted. He lingered a heartbeat too long, letting silence dig its claws into her presence. Then he said it. "Lieutenant Commander Blackwood," he spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear, "your cover is off by 1 centimeter." The words were precise, cutting, the kind designed not to correct but to humiliate. His cap was perfectly aligned, everyone knew it, but no one dared challenge his inspection, not when his reputation carried more weight than truth. His voice came calm, controlled. "Yes, sir, I'll correct it immediately." Her tone gave nothing away, not defiance, not fear, just professional obedience. But those who watched closely, Lieutenant Arwin in particular, caught the flicker of satisfaction in the Admiral's smirk. His jaw tightened as he hid his own grin. Everyone knew what was happening here, had chosen his target. The Admiral's crusade wasn't a secret. He'd spent the last year undermining the Pentagon's pilot program that integrated women into SEAL training. And a lieutenant commander with a quiet record and a reputation no one could quite pin down was his centerpiece. He wanted her to fail, and he would make sure she did. The inspection ended, and the operators were ordered to attention for the day's briefing. Commander Carl Train, 42 years old, by 17 years of special operations, stepped forward. He wasn't blind to the tension in the air, but unlike the Admiral, he had no patience for politics. His voice carried the sharp efficiency of a man who had survived too much to waste time. "Today's evolution will focus on extended maritime extraction under enemy observation," he announced. 15-mile offshore approach, structure infiltration, package retrieval. The words dropped like iron weights. This was a brutal exercise, one usually reserved for the end of training, not the 15th day of the program. Around the formation, small shifts in posture gave away what the operators wouldn't say aloud. This wasn't just training, it was a setup. "Command has accelerated the timeline," Admiral added smoothly, his eyes flicking toward like a blade drawn in the open. "Some candidates may find the adjustment challenging." The message was clear, she wouldn't survive this. When the formation broke, brushed against her shoulder, harder than necessary. His voice dropped low enough that only she could hear. "Hope you're a strong swimmer, Blackwood." Extraction weights got mysteriously heavier overnight. She didn't answer, didn't flinch. But later, when she lifted her tactical vest in the equipment room, she felt it immediately. 2 pounds heavier on the left side. A subtle sabotage, enough to drag a swimmer off balance over miles of open ocean. Her reaction was as precise as her movements. Silence. No complaints. No accusations. She simply adjusted, redistributing weight with calm efficiency. She had learned long ago that the loudest strength was sometimes the quietest response. It was then Captain Vesper Reeve walked into the room. Naval intelligence. Her presence was unusual here. Intelligence officers didn't waste time on training evolutions. But the brief nod she gave carried something unspoken. something only the two of them seemed to understand. The other operators noticed, they always noticed, but they said nothing. Minutes later, rotor wash blasted the training grounds as helicopters thundered into the air. Dust swirled around their boots, and the ocean glared like steel in the distance. As they boarded, a comms officer handed a secure tablet. Priority message, Lieutenant Commander, eyes only. She accepted it without hesitation, entered a code far more complex than anything her peers would recognize, and scanned the message. No change in expression, no sign of alarm. Only the subtle squaring of her shoulders gave her away. Something was happening beneath the surface of this exercise, something only she seemed to know. The helicopters roared across the coastline, carrying the teams 15 miles offshore into the churning Pacific. 4-foot swells rose and fell beneath the aircraft, skis pressing low against the water. The ocean was alive, restless, waiting. The operators entered the water one by one, vanishing beneath the waves with the smooth coordination of those who had long called the sea their second home. Lieutenant's team went first. Followed 30 seconds later, with her taking point even though she wasn't the official leader. Beneath the water, green light filtered through the surface, casting everything in a ghostly glow. Her hand signals were different, subtly off from SEAL protocol, more efficient, more precise. They weren't random adjustments, they belonged to a language no one else here had been taught. Lieutenant, the youngest on her team, caught it immediately. He'd only graduated Bud months ago, but even his limited experience told him these weren't improvisations. They were practiced, learned, rumored techniques from operations that didn't officially exist. The structure loomed ahead, a decommissioned oil platform turned into a training ground. Metal groaned in the currents, sensors blinked like silent eyes. They expected her to surface, to recon, to follow protocol. Instead gave one signal, one none of them recognized. Then she vanished alone into the structure. The others froze, confusion clawed at their instincts. Do they follow? Do they break formation? Swallowed hard and followed. The others trailed behind. Inside, visibility dropped to nothing. 5 feet, maybe less. The steel corridors echoed with the creak of old bones. Training sensors hummed along the walls, programmed to catch any standard SEAL approach, but didn't trigger them. Not once. She moved with eerie certainty, weaving through blind spots like she had memorized the place years ago. It wasn't chance, it was memory. By the time they reached the package, a heavy, weighted case meant to simulate classified intel's team was already there. He had his hands on it, a grin wide across his rebreather. Victory was his. Then everything happened at once. A sudden shift in currents, a flash of movement, a trick of water and light so fast no one could agree on later. One moment, his team was securing the package. The next, they were reacting to a phantom threat that didn't exist, forced into defensive positions. And his team was already gone, package in hand, slipping back into the darkness like shadows carried by the tide. His chest tightened. He wasn't sure if he'd just seen brilliance or madness. All he knew was this: no one in SEAL training could move like that. No one. Back aboard the command vessel, results were read aloud. His team had won, but Admiral's face remained stone. Time differential was minimal, he dismissed coldly, and unconventional tactics suggest poor adherence to established protocols. Stood at attention, her voice even. The mission parameters prioritize successful extraction over methodology, Admiral. Protocols exist for a reason, he snapped. Creative interpretation may work in training, but real combat demands discipline. A flicker passed across her face then, so subtle it could have been a shadow. Irony, challenge, memory, and then it was gone. Yes, sir, understood. From the far side of the deck, Captain Reeve watched with sharp eyes. She said nothing. But when their gazes met, something passed between them. Recognition, history, a truth no one else was ready to see. That night, as the program's operators gathered for the week's briefing, Commander Call Train announced the culmination ceremony. Each operator would receive their official call sign, a rite of passage, a name to carry through the rest of their careers. Admiral will present the call signs personally, Call Train explained. Representatives from SOCOM and Naval Special Warfare will attend. It is a significant milestone. Leaned close to her, his whisper dripping with contempt. Some traditions are earned, not given. The words cut deep, but gave no reaction. She had learned long ago that silence was sharper than any retort. But as the operators filed out, Captain Reeve intercepted her in a darkened hallway. Her voice dropped low. The Admiral has made his position clear. His eyes hardened. Has he compromised the operation? Reeve shook her head. No, he's behaving exactly as expected. The final assessment comes at the ceremony. The package arrives tomorrow, 7 years to the day. For the first time all day, something flickered in his face. Not fear, not doubt, something heavier, memory. Resolve. I'll hold position, she said quietly. And in the shadows of the hallway, unseen by either woman, Lieutenant stood frozen. He had overheard just enough to know there was more to her story than anyone had ever told. And for the first time he wondered, who exactly was Lieutenant Commander Blackwood? What happens when silence says more than defiance ever could? The training compound had buzzed with tension in the days after the maritime evolution. Every operator had seen what happened beneath the water. Every one of them had replayed it in their minds. And though none of them admitted it, all of them wondered the same thing. How had she done it? Lieutenant Commander Blackwood carried on as if nothing had changed. Her posture precise, her tone respectful, her uniform immaculate. She moved like a soldier who had nothing to prove, and yet every movement seemed to prove something anyway. Lieutenant Arwin, however, could not let it go. At the next tactical planning session, he made his move. The operators gathered around the table, maps and digital overlays spread before them. The mission was simple on paper: night infiltration, high-value target elimination, clean extraction. Every voice contributed, every operator weighed in on strategy except hers. When spoke, suggesting an alternative insertion vector, cut her off with a wave of his hand. Not relevant, we're running this by the book. She said nothing. Later, during the debrief, struck again, his words sharp and public. Blackwood's input was insufficient. She lacks situational awareness in operational planning. Admiral, watching from the back of the room, nodded approvingly. His silence was louder than any endorsement. His gaze never wavered. She didn't defend herself, didn't plead, didn't push back. She allowed the moment to pass, her composure intact. Only Commander Call Train's frown betrayed the truth, that her casualty projections had been the lowest of any team. Some types of experience can't be simulated, said pointedly, his eyes boring into her. They must be lived. The implication was clear: she didn't belong. But there was something he didn't know, something no one knew. Had lived experience no simulation could capture, and she carried it like a ghost in her veins. That afternoon in the armory, Lieutenant finally approached her. He had been quiet until now, too junior to challenge the atmosphere, too cautious to risk aligning himself with her. But what he had seen underwater kept gnawing at him. "Commander," he began, his voice uncertain, "that maneuver you used at the oil platform, I've never seen anything like it. Was it improvisation?" She adjusted her equipment without looking up. "Improvisation is sometimes necessary in fluid situations, Lieutenant." "With respect, ma'am," he pressed, "that wasn't improvisation, that was practiced, learned. Where did you serve before this assignment?" Her hand stilled, if only for a fraction of a second. Then she met his eyes, calm, steady, guarded. "That information is classified, beyond your current access level." She said it kindly but with finality. The wall was back up, and he knew better than to push further. Before either could say more, arrived with two others, his voice dripping mockery. Sharing secrets, Blackwood, or just explaining why you'll need extra time tonight. His expression didn't change. We were discussing equipment configurations, Lieutenant. His eyes narrowed at her tactical gear. That's not regulation. It's within acceptable parameters for this evolution. Commander Train approved the modification. The certainty in her tone irritated him more than defiance would have. He stepped closer, invading her space. You think because you've lasted 15 days here you understand what it means to be one of us. You have no idea. The life and death choices. The weight of command when no help is coming. You don't belong in these boots. For the first time, something flickered in her eyes. Not fear, not anger, something darker, a memory no one else could see. Her voice came low, steady. I understand more than you think, Lieutenant. Prove it, he challenged. Tonight's evolution, your team against mine, full autonomy, no rule book, let's see if you're more than a shadow. Before she could respond, Commander Train's voice cut in sharply. That's enough. This program isn't a proving ground for ego. With respect, sir, countered, competition reveals truth. Isn't that the point? Train hesitated. He didn't like it, but his eyes flicked to measuring her. Lieutenant Commander, your thoughts. I have no objection, she said quietly. Battlefield conditions rarely follow a script. Adaptability is worth measuring. Her calm acceptance surprised them both. That night the forest swallowed them whole. Under a moonless sky, helicopters roared overhead before fading into silence. Two teams descended by fast rope into dense terrain, their boots crunching against the earth. The objective, a simulated enemy communications center, 5 miles away. His team moved fast, direct, aggressive efficiency, the textbook play. Within an hour, they had covered nearly 70% of the ground. In the command center, Admiral smirked. Blackwood's team hasn't moved in 30 minutes. Perhaps the terrain is proving too difficult. Train studied the monitor. Or they're gathering intelligence. Or they're stuck, countered. But then the tactical display shifted. The comms center went red, high alert. His team had been detected, not by sight, by intercept. Their signals had been traced. They were pinned before they even arrived. Impossible, barked. On the screens, chaos unfolded. His favored team was locked down, forced to defend, their advantage shattered. And then, as if from nowhere, his team appeared inside the comms center. No firefight, no noise. One by one, the defenses collapsed in sequence, as though she had walked straight through the system's blind spots. Where the hell did they come from? Demanded. Alternative approach method, Train said quietly, though even he didn't believe what he was saying. In less than 10 minutes, the objective was theirs. Extraction executed flawlessly. Back in the debriefing room, stood before the display, her voice calm, measured. She explained the seasonal ravine that bypassed primary sensors. She showed the weight adjustments that made her team 20% faster. She outlined her comms modifications, standard gear, slightly reconfigured. It all sounded plausible, reasonable, but everyone in the room knew it wasn't that simple. Slammed his hand against the table. Enough! These techniques don't exist in doctrine. You're using methods you have no authorization for. Where did you learn them? Her expression never broke. My record contains classified sections, sir. They are not accessible at this clearance level. The words landed like a stone dropped in water. Silence rippled outward. Everyone heard what she hadn't said. If the Admiral couldn't access her record with Alpha 9 clearance, then her past existed in a place beyond his reach, beyond official channels, beyond explanation. Captain Reeves' eyes flickered, but she said nothing. Later that night, as walked the quiet corridors, Reeve intercepted her. She carried a small device, switched it on, and a soft hum filled the space, counter-surveillance. The Admiral's accelerating his inquiries, Reeve whispered. He's reaching through unofficial channels, old contacts, former officers. He's desperate. Which makes him predictable, replied. Her voice was calm, but her eyes carried weight. The ceremony is in 3 days. Everything remains on schedule. And the package? Reeve asked. It arrives tomorrow, 7 years to the day. For a moment, silence stretched. 7 years since Song. 7 years since the mission that no one dared speak of. 7 years since something in Blackwood's life had ended and something else had begun. From the shadows, unseen, Lieutenant stood frozen, his chest tight, his thoughts racing. He had heard enough to know this wasn't about training anymore. But he hadn't heard enough to understand the truth. Not yet. Why did the alarms sound when no one had touched the system? The training compound was alive with movement that morning. Operators moved quickly across the grounds, their gear strapped tight, their faces set. It was supposed to be another day of controlled chaos, CQB exercises inside the massive urban warfare facility. Multi-story rooms, twisting corridors, stairwells designed to confuse even the best-trained mind. Admiral stood in the elevated control room, watching with the quiet hunger of a predator. Beside him, a visiting Marine Corps general studied the monitors. And below, inside the labyrinth, teams moved in pairs, weapons raised, voices low over comms. His team advanced with measured efficiency. Every corner cleared, every movement deliberate. She didn't waste energy. She didn't hesitate. She had mapped the facility in her head before they entered, each turn memorized, each choke point anticipated. Then it happened. Alarms blared, not simulated, real. Smoke began to roll through one of the sections, first white, then black, not harmless training markers, fire. The control room erupted in shouts. Warning lights pulsed red across the panels. "What's happening?" demanded. The technician at the console worked furiously. "Sir, there's been a malfunction in the simulation system. The fire suppression sequence misfired, actual incendiaries deployed." "Evacuate the structure immediately," General Hayes ordered. "Negative, sir. Lockdown engaged. The doors are sealed until we reset from the control node inside the structure." On the screens, the operators reacted instantly, their training snapping into instinct. Most teams found alternative exits, adapting with the discipline drilled into their bones. But not all of them. His team was trapped. 4 operators caught in the worst of it, smoke choking the corridor, a sealed steel door blocking their way. Their comms crackled with static. Fear bled through even their trained voices. And then there was. While the others pushed toward exits, she didn't. Her team had been moving toward safety, but she had broken away, slipping alone into the smoke. "What the hell is she doing?" barked, leaning toward the monitor. "She's moving toward the control node," Train said, his voice tight. "She's not evacuating, she's going for the override." "That's against protocol," snapped. "No operator proceeds without team support." General Hayes said nothing. His eyes remained fixed on the monitors. He'd seen many things in his years, but this was something different. The screens flickered, smoke obscuring the cameras. Grainy glimpses showed her moving alone through the corridors, her steps deliberate, her movements confident, like she had walked this path before in another life. At the sealed door where his team was pinned, she paused, fingers working quickly over the panel. The lock released with a click. Impossible. Those systems were proprietary, locked down, then classified vaults. How did she do that? Demanded, but no one answered. On the screen, stumbled into clearer air, his face streaked with soot, his eyes wide with something he had never felt before, being saved by her. Pressed forward, alone, into the thick of the smoke. By the time she reached the control node, flames had eaten through panels. The heat distorted the cameras. Still, she moved with precision, her hands running across controls in a sequence no one in the control room recognized. The alarms cut, the suppression systems engaged. Water cascaded down the corridors, steam rising in violent bursts. Within minutes, the fire was extinguished, doors unlocked. Operators stumbled out coughing but alive. Every single one of them. The control room fell silent. The technician's voice finally broke it. Systems stabilized, facility secure. On the monitors, walked calmly back through the smoke, her uniform scorched at the edges, her face streaked but her expression composed. She looked less like a trainee and more like something older, something forged. In the medical checkpoint that followed, sat with an oxygen mask, his lungs rattling with smoke. When she passed, he pulled the mask away. His voice was ragged, but his words clear. "How did you know that bypass sequence? That's proprietary. Even I don't have clearance for that." She paused, meeting his eyes. Sometimes training includes elements that don't appear in manuals. "That wasn't training," he rasped. "Nobody learns that except—" He stopped himself. His eyes widened, realization cutting through his exhaustion. "Except who?" she asked quietly. He had no answer. Only the dawning suspicion that the woman he had spent weeks mocking was someone he should fear. Admiral summoned her the moment the medical evaluations cleared. His office was as meticulous as his posture. Clean lines, medals displayed, books aligned perfectly. A shrine to his career. "Explain yourself," he ordered the instant she stood before his desk. "How did you override those systems?" "Standard emergency procedures, Admiral," she said, standing at attention. "Don't insult me," he snapped, moving around the desk. "Those weren't standard. That was a proprietary sequence reserved for developers and other units." His voice lowered. "Units I'm not supposed to know about." Her gaze never broke. "Perhaps my previous assignments included relevant training, sir." "I've reviewed your service record," he said sharply. "Every page. Annapolis graduate, 3 years in naval intelligence. Lateral transfer to surface warfare. Then selection for this program, that's it. Nothing in there explains what you've done here." Her reply was steady. "Not all training appears in accessible records, Admiral." His jaw tightened. "I have Alpha 9 clearance. There is nothing in naval special warfare beyond my reach." For the first time, something flickered across her face. A shadow of a smile, or maybe just knowledge. "Yes, sir, you do." The word struck him harder than defiance, harder than any insult, because beneath her calm was a truth he couldn't touch. His eyes narrowed. "Who are you really working for? CIA? DIA? Some black program running above my head? You think you can manipulate this command?" Her answer was simple. "I am a naval officer assigned to complete this program, nothing more." It was the only answer she could give. The only answer that didn't burn everything down. "This isn't over," hissed. "You're confined to quarters until further notice. I'll initiate a full security review." That would violate direct orders from Naval Special Warfare Command regarding the pilot program's integrity, sir, she said evenly. "I am Naval Special Warfare in this command," he snapped, leaning close. His breath smelled of coffee and power. "And I will not be manipulated." Before the standoff could sharpen further, the door opened. Captain Reeves stepped inside, her expression neutral but her presence heavy. "Admiral," she said, "General Hayes has requested Lieutenant Commander Blackwood's immediate input on the system malfunction. Technical debrief." "She's under review," snapped. "The general was specific, sir." For a moment the room froze. Jaw clenched, his eyes burning with fury. Finally, with barely concealed rage, he nodded. "Very well, but this conversation isn't finished." "Of course not, sir," replied, her military courtesy so perfect it almost mocked him. Reeve led her not to Hayes but to a secure comms room. The door sealed. Reeve activated a counter-surveillance field. "We have a problem," she said quietly. "That wasn't a malfunction, it was sabotage. The access codes used were tied to Admiral's profile." His eyes narrowed. then either he's forcing our hand or someone else is using his name. Either way, it's a breach, Reeves said. We may need to accelerate the timeline. No, said firmly. Changing plans now risks exposure. The ceremony remains our best chance. That's 2 days away, with flag officers and foreign observers present, if anything happens. It won't, said her voice flat, certain. This is about exposure, not destruction. They won't strike when the world is watching. Reeves studied her face, the calm exterior that hid so much. 7 years is a long time to carry this mission. His gaze didn't waver. Some debts can only be paid in full. The comms panel lit up then, a priority signal cutting across their words. The message was brief, only a few words on the screen. Widow protocol initiated. Stand by for package delivery. Both women stared at it. Both knew what it meant. The endgame had begun. Why did the Admiral change the order at the last moment? The culmination ceremony was supposed to be tradition, a rite of passage, a moment when operators received their call signs in front of peers and commanders, their names forever forged into the brotherhood of naval special warfare. But from the very beginning, something about this ceremony was off. The hall gleamed under bright lights. American flags framed the stage. Rows of medals and uniforms filled the seats. SOCOM officials, naval command, even foreign military observers. The room was heavy with formality, with history, with judgment. At the center of the stage stood Admiral Victor, resplendent in his dress uniform, every ribbon polished, every line of his posture sharp. He was a man who had built a career out of controlling the narrative, and tonight his story was about to be written in stone. The operators sat in the front row, backs straight, hands clasped on their knees. Every face was tight with discipline, but every heart carried the weight of what they'd endured. Among them sat Blackwood, her expression as unreadable as ever. When the ceremony began, his voice filled the hall. For over 60 years, naval special warfare has represented the pinnacle of American capability. Those who wear the trident earn it through strength, expertise, and character. The emphasis on earn was subtle, but everyone caught it. The ceremony unfolded in practiced rhythm. One by one, operators were called alphabetically. Each received a ceremonial chalice of salt water, symbol of the sea that had forged them. Each was given a call sign, their essence distilled into a single word that would follow them forever. When Lieutenant Arwin was called, his voice swelled with pride. Your leadership during the Omen evolution ensured your team's survival under pressure. You will be known as Beacon. Applause echoed, accepted the chalice, drinking the salt water with satisfaction before saluting the Admiral. His eyes flicked toward as if to remind her he belonged here. She didn't. The ceremony continued. The front row slowly emptied, applause after applause, pride layered on pride, until only one remained seated. The change in order was no accident. Everyone knew it. Alphabetical order had been broken. The message was clear. She would be left for last, singled out, made an example of. Stepped forward again, his voice carrying through the hall. As many of you know, this program represents significant change. The integration of women into special operations roles is unprecedented. While we follow directives, it remains our duty to ensure standards never falter. The words struck like a blade, dressed as ceremony, spoken as judgment. Lieutenant Commander Blackwood, he called, his voice sharp. She rose. Her movements were deliberate, measured. No hesitation, no defiance. She walked toward the stage as though she had walked toward fire before, and this was nothing new. The Admiral studied her with narrowed eyes as he held the chalice. Before we proceed, perhaps you would share with our distinguished guests your most significant operational achievement. The words froze the room. This wasn't protocol. No one else had been asked. The question was a trap designed to expose her, to remind everyone that her record, sanitized, redacted, held no visible victories. His face remained composed, her voice steady. With respect, Admiral, my operational history includes classified deployments that cannot be discussed in this setting. A thin smile touched his lips. Of course, convenient. He turned slightly to the audience, his words now both ceremonial and sharp. Call signs reflect achievement, proven ability under fire. They are earned, not given. Lieutenant Commander, what call sign have your instructors and peers assigned you? Another trap. She had been excluded from the deliberations. By protocol, she should have no answer. Silence would humiliate her. The room waited. Took the chalice, her hand steady, her eyes never leaving his face. Iron Widow, sir. The words dropped like stones into still water. Silence spread outward, heavy, suffocating. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. His face shifted in an instant, from smug certainty to confusion to dawning horror. The chalice slipped from his fingers, shattering against the stage, spilled like secrets spreading across the wood. That's not possible, he whispered, his voice stripped of power. Iron Widow is classified. Every head in the hall turned back to her. Stood tall, her voice calm but clear enough to carry to every corner of the room. 7 years ago, 6 SEAL operators were captured during a compromised mission in North Korea, presumed unrecoverable. They were held at a black site designated Song. His hand trembled against the podium. They were rescued, she continued, by a specialized asset, Iron Widow, an unsanctioned extraction carried out under impossible conditions. From the audience, Lieutenant lurched to his feet, his face pale, his voice raw. That night, you carried me 3 miles with a broken femur. I never saw your face. They told us you were a local. The hall erupted with whispers, disbelief rippling like a storm. Captain Reeve stepped forward, her naval intelligence insignia gleaming. She reached up, removed it. In its place, the stars of a rear admiral. Gasps moved through the audience. Lieutenant Commander Blackwood's identity as Iron Widow has remained classified at the highest level, she announced. Her placement in this program was part of a 7-year counterintelligence operation to uncover the source of the original compromise. Swayed, his face ashen, his carefully crafted mask cracking. This is irregular, he muttered, his voice hollow. This ceremony has protocols. Indeed it does, Rear Admiral Reeve said sharply. Protocols that do not include public humiliation for personal bias. From the seats, one operator rose, then another, then another. They were the men from Song, the ones who had been saved. Their eyes burned with memory as they stood and saluted her. It wasn't casual, it wasn't ceremony. It was something deeper, respect carved from life and death. The salute spread, row by row, soldier by soldier, until the entire hall stood in silence, saluting the woman who had been dismissed as an outsider, now revealed as a legend. Admiral sank slowly into his chair, his body heavy with the collapse of a lifetime. His voice carried over the silence. 7 years ago, I made a promise to 6 men I pulled from that mountain. I promised I would find who betrayed them, no matter how long it took, no matter how high up the chain it reached. Her hand reached into her uniform. She pulled out a small pin, a spider brooch, the red hourglass glinting under the stage lights. She pinned it to her collar, no longer hidden. Her eyes locked on the Admiral. That promise ends tonight. Every head turned to him, every silence weighed on his shoulders. And in that silence, the most feared admiral in the Navy trembled. How many years can a man hide behind his medals before the truth finds him? The ceremony hall had never been this silent. Hundreds of uniforms, rows of polished medals, the weight of history itself, all of it pressed down on Admiral Victor as he sat slumped in his chair. His face was pale, his breathing shallow. The chalice lay shattered at his feet, it seeping across the stage like spilled blood. Blackwood stood above him, the widow brooch glinting on her collar. Her voice, calm but cutting, carried across the hall. The mission at Song was compromised by a security breach inside naval intelligence. Access codes used to locate us belonged to Admiral Victor. Gasps rippled through the crowd. For years had stood as the immovable face of naval special warfare, decorated, untouchable, but now the floor beneath him cracked and every eye was watching the fall. "I was in a classified briefing," said quickly, desperation lacing his tone. "I couldn't have accessed anything." "You left that briefing," Rear Admiral Reeve interjected, her voice sharp as steel. "For 23 minutes. Security logs confirm it. During that exact window, your codes were used to breach the system." The audience shifted. Whispers spread like wildfire. Officers who had once stood at rigid attention now leaned forward, their eyes locked on him, not with respect but suspicion. "That doesn't prove intent," insisted. His voice cracked under the weight of exposure. "It could have been negligence. I may have left my terminal unsecured. That's all." His gaze held him, unblinking. Negligence nearly cost 6 operators their lives. Negligence left them to rot in a foreign black site, while you built your reputation on their survival. The words struck deeper than accusation. They stripped him bare. Stood suddenly, his voice breaking. "She carried me through those mountains. With a broken leg, I begged her to leave me. She didn't. That's not negligence, that's truth." His hands trembled on the armrest of his chair. He looked smaller than he had ever been, diminished by the truth, diminished by the silence of those who no longer believed in him. And then one by one, operators began to rise. They removed their trident pins, the sacred insignia of their brotherhood, and laid them at his feet. First, then more. The sound of each pin striking the stage echoed like a drumbeat of judgment. Within minutes, a small collection of tridents glinted on the floor before her, a spontaneous offering, a recognition that no policy, no admiral, no program could erase. Reeves' voice broke through the charged silence. "Lieutenant Commander Blackwood, call sign, Iron Widow. By authority of Naval Special Warfare Command, you are recognized as the first female operator of DEVGRU with distinction." She extended a small black case. Inside lay a modified trident insignia, its surface marked with the red hourglass. Accepted it with steady hands. Her expression gave nothing away, but those who watched closely might have seen the faintest flicker of emotion behind her calm exterior. Applause erupted, not polite, not ceremonial. It was raw, genuine, the sound of a community recognizing one of its own. His voice broke over it, thin and desperate. This is highly irregular. These men, they don't understand the implications." "On the contrary, Admiral," Reeves said, her voice sharp. "They understand exactly. They honor excellence, courage, sacrifice, the very values you claim to protect." The applause swelled louder, drowning him out. Gripped the podium as though it could anchor him, but his career, his authority, his reputation, all of it slipped through his fingers. Turned, facing the assembly, her voice cut through the noise. 7 years ago, I carried 6 men from the mountains of North Korea. I promised them I would find the source of the betrayal that put them there. Tonight, I have kept that promise." Her eyes flicked once more to the Admiral. He had nothing left to say. Security officers moved discreetly through the hall, standing behind him. The official story would be sanitized, medical retirement, health issues, but everyone here understood what had truly happened. Stepped back from the podium, the widow, brooch shining in the lights. For the first time in years, the burden she had carried alone was no longer hers. The mission was complete. But completion did not mean peace. Later, as the hall emptied, approached her. No mockery this time, no challenge, only respect. "Commander," he said quietly, "I owe you apologies, more than I can count, not just for here, for that night. I never saw your face, but I remember your voice. You told me I wasn't going to die there. I carried those words for 7 years." Her gaze softened, though only slightly. The promise is what mattered, Lieutenant, not who gave it. He nodded, his throat tight. Maybe, but knowing it was you changes everything. Stepped forward next, his expression heavy with questions. Commander, how did you keep cover for so long, even with the Admiral trying to break you? She paused. For the first time, her lips curved in the faintest trace of what might have been a smile. SEAL training teaches endurance under pressure, Lieutenant. I simply applied those lessons differently. Before he could press further, Rear Admiral Reeve joined them. Her tone was brisk, but her eyes carried warmth. Lieutenant Commander Blackwood has a new assignment, effective immediately. Her experience will be invaluable in shaping the future of integrated teams. The operators around them straightened. They understood. She wasn't just part of the Brotherhood now. She was the one rewriting it. That night, alone in her quarters, finally let the silence settle. She removed the brooch from her collar, holding it in her hands. The red hourglass glinted faintly in the dim light, a reminder of 7 years spent in shadows. Was it worth it? The question slipped unbidden into her thoughts. The knock at her door came softly. Reeve entered, her voice low. The debrief is scheduled for 800. Naval Intelligence will want full accounting. Nodded. Was it worth it, Admiral? Reeve studied her for a long moment, then answered quietly. You saved 6 lives at Song. Tonight, you saved countless more by ending his shadow. So yes, it was worth it. Return the brooch to its case. The mission was over, but the weight of 7 years did not lift so easily. Then what happens next? She asked. Reeve's reply was simple. That's up to you. What happens after the curtain falls, when the applause fades and the silence returns? For days after the ceremony, the compound seemed different. Not louder, not busier, simply heavier. Conversations stopped when walked past, not in mockery anymore, but in awe. Some of the operators struggled to look her in the eye, as if her presence reminded them of everything they hadn't seen, everything they hadn't believed. But the weight of recognition wasn't the same as peace. In the early mornings, when the base was still cloaked in gray light, would rise before reveille. She'd lace her boots, tighten her hair, and walk the perimeter alone. The silence of those walks steadied her, but it also reminded her of nights in the mountains, of snow crunching beneath her boots as she carried men half-conscious on her shoulders, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. The promise had been kept, but promises had costs. Rear Admiral Reeve's office became the center of everything. Officers rotated through for briefings, new directives filtered down, and security audits combed through every record connected to tenure. He'd been removed quietly, packaged in medical retirement, but the truth was no secret among those who mattered. Sat across from Reeve one morning, the widow brooch resting in its case on the desk between them. She never wore it except when ordered. The symbol was too heavy, too final to carry daily. The program will continue, Reeve said, her voice brisk though her eyes softened. You'll transition into a formal training role, integrated teams, advisory at first, then operational leadership. His jaw tightened. They don't need me teaching, they need me in the field. Reeve studied her for a long moment. The field is where you've lived for 7 years, alone, hidden, always waiting for the next shadow to fall. You've earned more than another mission. Didn't answer, because part of her knew it was true, and yet part of her recoiled at the thought of standing still. Change doesn't come from a single victory, Reeve continued. It comes from building something that lasts. You can shape that now. The words were meant as encouragement, but they landed like chains. Later that day, she entered the training facility, not as a participant but as an instructor. Operators lined up, their faces expectant. Among them were still restless with questions, and his pride reshaped into something quieter, steadier. She began simply. The battlefield doesn't follow manuals, neither should you, but discipline doesn't mean rigidity, it means readiness for anything. Her drills were brutal, not out of cruelty but necessity. She pushed them into situations where doctrine failed, where instinct mattered more than protocol. And time after time, she showed them pathways they hadn't seen, vulnerabilities no manual listed. By the end of the week, even the most skeptical had stopped questioning. And yet, when the lights dimmed and the compound quieted, she sat alone with silence. Found her one evening, seated on the overlooking the dark waves. He approached hesitantly, as though stepping into a space not meant for him. "Permission to speak freely, Commander?" he asked. "You already are," she replied softly. He hesitated, then said, "What happened at Song, it's not just about betrayal, is it? You carry more than finding who leaked. You carry what you had to do to get them out." Her profile was lit faintly by moonlight. She didn't answer immediately. "Every man you saved came home," he pressed gently. "But who didn't?" The question cut deeper than he knew. She drew a slow breath. "2 didn't make it. I carried 6. I left 2. I've carried that number every day since." Swallowed, "You couldn't have saved everyone." "Tell that to the 2 families who never knew the truth," she whispered. For a moment, silence hung between them, heavy but honest. Then she stood, her posture straight, her face set back into its unreadable calm. "Rest, Lieutenant. Tomorrow will test you harder than today." He nodded, but the image of her silhouetted against the waves stayed with him long after. The days bled into weeks. Respect became routine. Commander Blackwood carried no derision anymore, only weight, only recognition. But respect didn't erase isolation. In the mess hall, she still ate alone. In the barracks, she still kept her door locked. And in her dreams, she still walked through snow, carrying broken men on her shoulders. One afternoon, during a full-scale urban assault simulation, the compound's power cut out without warning. Lights died. Generators failed. For 5 seconds, everything was silent. Then the emergency systems flickered online. To most, it was a hiccup, a technical fault. To, it was a memory. She moved instantly, her eyes scanning, her posture sharp. After the drill, she confronted Reeve. "That outage wasn't a fault. Someone tested our response." Reeve didn't deny it. She simply said, "We're still digging into networks. He didn't work alone. And if they know the Widow protocol has been activated, they'll probe. We need to be ready." His jaw tightened. "Then don't keep me behind glass. Let me hunt." "You've hunted enough," Reeve said quietly. "Now we wait." But wasn't sure she could wait. That night, as she lay in her bunk, the soft hum of surveillance detectors filled the air. She learned to recognize their rhythm. But tonight the hum was wrong, a half-beat out of sync. Someone was listening. She rose silently, dismantling the device with practiced hands. Inside, buried deep, she found a transmitter, new, not Navy-issued. The mission wasn't over. Not yet. What if the Admiral had only been the mask, not the hand behind it? The transmitter sat on his desk like a wound that hadn't healed. Small, ordinary, yet wrong in every way. The kind of device that whispered of patience, of planning, of eyes in the dark. She had dismantled it in silence, piece by piece. By the time dawn came, every wire lay separated, every chip cataloged in her mind. It was no Navy build, too efficient, too lean. Whoever placed it knew what they were doing. Rear Admiral Reeves' jaw tightened when she saw it. "We sweep every room weekly. Whoever planted this had access, clearance." "Inside the compound," said quietly. "Not accusation, just fact." Reeve exhaled slowly. "We assumed acted alone. Maybe he didn't." That evening, naval intelligence analysts traced the transmitter's signature to a relay station miles off the California coast. An unmanned platform, supposedly decommissioned years ago. The briefing room buzzed with tension. Operators leaned forward, eyes on the map, glanced at unspoken questions in his stare, sat rigid, his jaw set. "This isn't a drill," Reeve told them. "This is external surveillance piggybacking on internal access. We're sending a team to sweep and secure." She paused, her eyes flicking toward. Commander Blackwood will lead. The room went still. No one questioned it, not anymore. Hours later, helicopters thundered across dark water. The team fast-roped onto the platform, boots striking rusted steel. The ocean heaved below, black and endless. They moved with precision, clearing corridors lit only by emergency lamps. Dust coated the walls. Equipment sat abandoned, or so it seemed. Halfway through, the silence broke. A single burst of gunfire cracked from the shadows. Metal rang, sparks flew. The team dove for cover. "Contact upper deck," shouted. Figures moved through the dark, disciplined, trained, their movements sharp. Whoever they weren't amateurs. Advanced low, her steps precise. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing against her ribs, the old rhythm of combat returning like it had never left. The firefight was brutal but brief. Controlled bursts, disciplined angles. Within minutes, the last hostile fell silent. The team regrouped, knelt by a fallen assailant pulling back the hood, his face hardened. "Not foreign, American." His voice cracked through the comms. "They're carrying Navy-grade optics, but these insignias—" He held up a patch stripped from one of the dead. It bore no unit name, only a symbol, a black trident without the anchor. Stared at it, her face unreadable. "Rogue, off-book, ghost unit." "Who runs them?" asked. She didn't answer, because she already knew. In the control room of the platform, servers still hummed, lights blinking faintly. She moved to the console, hands gliding across the keys. Layer after layer of encrypted files unfolded. At the center, operations logs, not months old, not years, current. And there, listed in cold clarity, was her name. Monitored, tagged, watched. They hadn't been waiting for, they'd been waiting for her. His voice was hushed, uncertain. "Why you?" "Closed the file. Because I wasn't supposed to survive song. My existence is their failure, and failures are erased." They extracted at dawn. The ocean below was calm, but the silence inside the helicopter was heavy. No one spoke, not until the base was in sight. Then leaned closer, his voice low. "Commander, if this is bigger then none of us are safe." She looked at him, her eyes steady. "None of us ever were." Back at Reeves' expression hardened when she read the files. "This isn't a loose end. This is a network, embedded, protected. They've been watching for years." Her hand pressed against the desk, her knuckles white. "If they know you've resurfaced, they won't stop." "They never stopped," said softly. "We just didn't see it." The room fell silent. Finally Reeves straightened. "We shut it down, all of it, but this can't be official. Too many channels compromised. It has to be off-book." Her eyes met, "And it has to be you." That night, alone in her quarters, sat in the dim glow of a desk lamp. The widow brooch lay open on the table. For 7 years it had been the symbol of her secret. Now it was bait. She thought of the 6 men she carried through the mountains, of the 2 she couldn't, of the promise she had made. The promise was kept, but another one formed in its place. Not to carry, not to save. To finish. The knock at her door came soft. Entered hesitant. "Commander, I know this isn't my place, but whatever's coming, I want in. You don't owe me trust, but I owe you loyalty. You pulled me through things no one else saw. Don't go alone." She studied him for a long moment. In his eyes, she didn't see mockery, didn't see doubt. Only the stubborn courage of a man willing to stand in the fire. "You'll follow orders?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." Her gaze softened by a fraction. "Then pack light. We leave at first light." As he turned to go, appeared in the doorway. His voice was quiet but firm. "Add me to the list. If they're ghosts, then I owe them a reckoning. For the mountains, for everything." For a moment, the 3 of them stood in silence, bound not by protocol but by something older, heavier. Finally nodded, "Then it's settled." Outside, the waves pounded against the shore. The night was dark, but inside her, something colder burned steady. Iron Widow was not hiding anymore. She was hunting. How do you end a war no one admits ever started? The dawn was quiet when the helicopter lifted off from. No fanfare, no ceremony. Just three figures strapped into their seats, gear tight, faces set. Sat at the center, her eyes locked on the horizon. Checked his weapon for the fourth time. Sat silent, staring at the floor. They weren't going as a platoon. They weren't going as representatives of naval special warfare. They were going as shadows, chasing shadows. The target was a black facility buried in the Sierra Nevada mountains, a place not marked on maps, not spoken of in briefings. Its walls hid the servers that had tracked for years, the safe house for the ghost unit born of betrayal. As the helicopter cut across the mountain air, felt the weight pressing against her chest. She had carried 6 men once, stumbling through snow with blood freezing on her clothes. Now she carried 2 beside her, different men, but men she had chosen to trust. The insertion was silent. They hiked the final miles on foot, boots crunching over frost. The trees loomed tall and black against the stars. Moved at the front, her steps precise, her breathing steady. For her, silence was a weapon. At the facility came into view. Low buildings, floodlights sweeping the perimeter, armed sentries at regular intervals. Nothing about it was sloppy. Nothing about it said abandoned. This was a place alive with purpose. A whisper crackled in her earpiece, too tight for 3 to breach. Then we don't breach, she murmured back. We walk in. Glanced at her, confusion flickering across his face, but he followed. Minutes later they stood at the gate. Guards shifted uneasily, hands tightening on rifles as stepped forward, unarmed. The widow brooch gleamed faintly on her collar. The guard captain frowned. Identification. Her voice was calm, cold. You already know who I am. The man's eyes widened, and in that instant she knew she was right. They had been waiting for her. The gates opened. Inside, the facility smelled of oil and cold steel. Men moved like soldiers, but their uniforms bore no flags, no names. Their eyes tracked her as she walked through the corridors, flanked by in. Finally, they entered a wide control chamber. Banks of servers lined the walls. Screens glowed with shifting data, and at the center stood a man she had seen only in fragments of intelligence photos. Gray hair cropped close, sharp features carved from stone. Commander Blackwood, he said, his voice smooth, deliberate. Or should I say Iron Widow? His face betrayed nothing. Names don't matter, only truths. The man smiled faintly. Truths are dangerous things. You of all people should know that. Then let's speak it plain, she said. You built this. You fed his orders. You compromised Song. 6 men nearly died because of you. 2 did. That blood is yours. For a moment silence filled the room. Then the man inclined his head. And yet you saved them. You built a myth that even I couldn't kill. Do you understand what you've done? You've proven that one person can undo entire structures. That's why you've been watched. Not to destroy you, at least not at first. To see if you could be useful. Her jaw tightened. Useful. You were never supposed to survive that mountain, he continued. But when you did, when you carried 6 operators home, you became proof of concept. A weapon that didn't need an army. Just resolve. Imagine if we harnessed that instead of fighting it. His hand twitched toward his weapon. Eyes burned, but stood still, her voice level. I'm not your weapon. I'm the reminder that betrayal has a cost. The man studied her, then sighed. A shame, you could have led them. He gestured slightly, and in an instant armed figures stepped from the shadows, rifles raised, the room filled with the weight of inevitability. But didn't move. Her eyes were steady, her voice cold as iron. You've miscalculated again. The first shot cracked not from the enemy, but from. The room erupted into chaos. Moved with disciplined speed, his rifle stitching shadows into silence. Surged forward, closing the distance to the gray-haired man. They collided hard, her hand wrenching the sidearm from his holster. His face twisted with fury as they struggled, but her movements were precise, efficient. The fight was brief. It always was when one side fought for power and the other fought for promise. When it ended, he was on the ground, his weapon gone, his network burning on the screens as charges tore through the servers. Flames licked the air. The ghosts that had hunted her for 7 years were unraveling in front of her eyes. The man gasped through blood. "You think this ends it? Shadows don't die, they wait. Another will come." Crouched beside him, her voice calm. "Then I'll be waiting." She stood as the charges detonated fully, fire consuming the servers, smoke choking the chamber. The three of them moved fast, cutting through the chaos, out into the freezing dawn air. The facility burned behind them. The sun broke the gold and red against the mountains. They didn't speak until the helicopter lifted them into the sky. Sat staring at the horizon, his face hard but alive. Exhaled a long breath, tension bleeding from his shoulders. Sat silent. The brooch was back in her hand, the red hourglass glowing faintly in the morning light. She had carried it for 7 years as a burden. Now it felt like something else. Not release, not freedom, but closure. Back at they landed without ceremony. No flags, no applause, just quiet acknowledgment that a shadow war had ended where few would ever know it existed. Reeve met them on the tarmac. Her eyes flicked from to the 2 men beside her, then to the faint scorch marks on their gear. She said nothing. She didn't need to. Later that night returned to the ocean stretched endless before her, waves crashing against stone. The brooch rested in her palm. She thought of the 6 men. She thought of the 2 she couldn't save. She thought of promises broken, kept, and reborn. His voice broke the silence. He stood a few paces back, uncertain if he was intruding. "Commander, what now?" Her eyes stayed on the horizon. For a long moment she said nothing. Then softly, "Now we build something they can't break." The wind carried her words into the night, where they disappeared into the roar of the sea. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And in the silence of that moment, the Iron Widow was no longer a secret, no longer a shadow. She was exactly what they had never wanted her to be. Unstoppable,